Well, good morning, Hillcrest. I'm glad you're with us today on this graduation Sunday for so many. And before I start today, I want to let you know that there are two people that are sitting in the congregation right now that are, for me, the epitome of two things. First of all, the epitome of what it truly means to be a husband and wife, and the two become one. And they are just such a match for each other. But the other thing is insignificant as well. A couple I'm talking about, and I wasn't planning on this at all, they're just here today, is Daryl and Cease Dockler, right over here. That's Tarina's parents, by the way. And when I went through some of the most difficult times of my ministry, when I didn't know if I was going to survive, and I didn't know if I should speak up or be silent, the two of them were key people in my life and my journey that helped me get through that to be here today. Daryl is one that said, speak up, say what needs to be said. And he helped me a couple of times formulate what that was. And Cease is kind of like the exact complement of that, because she says, say it in love. Be graceful. Let the Spirit speak through you. Let the Spirit speak for you. And so the two of them together, thank you. Okay, that's that. I want to start off today by telling you a story about a guy that I knew long ago. This individual I got really close to in my seminary days. We hung out together. We became really close friends. Our families loved each other. It's the kind of relationship that just grows through going through hard things together. As we went through seminary, we studied together. We goofed off together. We played hooky together from seminary. Yes, there's gaps in my theology because of that, but they were good days. And me and this guy, we really had a very special relationship. I have such fond memories of those days with him and us hanging out. And then as we got close and as time went on, I started to notice some things. And any one of them on their own was really nothing. Just, coincidence or minor or who cares. And then I see another and something in another area, and they started stacking up. And I started to realize, I think there's a real problem here. And I felt inside like I needed to say something to him. That I needed to step up and I needed to be bold. And if I loved him and if I cared about him and if this relationship meant anything to me, that I needed to speak up. And so I decided that I would. And I knew it was going to be really hard to do. I remember one specific time that I really kind of planned events so that the setting would be right and where I could just kind of, say what needed to be said. And it's interesting when that moment actually comes, and the moment that you've created and you have everything you know you're going to say, your brain starts doing calculations. You start wondering, can I do this? And every time I tried, I hit a wall. And today I want to talk a little bit about that wall that we all experience when there's something that we need to say, something that we know is important and helpful and significant, and we don't say that thing. I think most of the silence that we have in those moments is not because there's an absence of words from us. I think the silence comes in our lives because it's a decision that we make. We make it quietly, we make it quickly, and eventually it really becomes automatic to us, and we just kind of let those moments pass, even though we know that we need to say what it is we need to say. We calculate. That's what I was doing with my friend. What is this going to cost me? What is this going to cost me relationally while I lose this relationship? What will this reveal? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just kind of making it up. Maybe my entire assessment is off, and this is going to be devastating for me to be wrong about this. Maybe there's somebody else that should be saying this other than me. Maybe somebody else is better prepared or better suited to have this conversation. I just excused it in any way I possibly could. And by the time we're done calculating what it costs us to have the conversation, the moment has passed. And we tell ourselves, I'll say it next time. Because there's always a next time until there isn't. What about you in your life? Is there somebody that you need to have a conversation with? Is there someone in your life that you need to say something to that is moving in a direction that is not good for them? You can see the cliff in front of them that they can't see. And you keep thinking, I'll say something. Eventually I will. The timing's just not right. The moment's not right. Somebody else will probably step in and say something, and they continue moving that direction. I mean, this could be so close to you. This could be in your current relationship. This could be between a husband and wife, and there's something that you need to say in that relationship, and you're not saying it because you're afraid of what will happen, what the risk is in your relationship if you say the thing that you know you need to say. And so you've just stifled it. You've just shut it down because you've gone through 100 times of not saying it. And because of that, your relationship is not where it's supposed to be. It's because of that, many times we find ourselves suffering in something because we're not saying what needs to be said. It could be a friendship that you have, same sort of thing. Another relative in your life, a brother or a sister, a parent that you need to talk to. You've been wounded, you've been hurt, there's been things that have gone on that aren't good, and you know you need to step up and say something. It could be something at work. It can be something anywhere in your life. Where do you have those moments? I believe that every single one of us have something we need to say. But we're probably, most of us not saying it. I'm not asking you today to raise your hand if you have something you need to say. But I am asking this. I am asking that you be honest with yourself for the next 15, 20 minutes. Be honest with yourself on what's going on, what needs to be said that you have somehow set aside, and you're even telling yourself, like, that is old and that is gone, and I don't need to worry about that anymore, though the issue is still there, and you know that those words are what need to be placed in that situation. I want to tell you about a woman who saw what was coming, the problem, and she wrote out anyways to address it. The biblical character I want to talk about today is a woman named Abigail. Now, I want to tell you the situation of Abigail before I get to some of the scripture. Abigail, she had a husband. She was married, and her husband's name was Nabal. Now, if you know Hebrew, I don't expect you to know Hebrew, but if you know Hebrew, Nabal is the Hebrew word for fool. And I don't mean like it's some subset part of the language that could kind of go either way, but they have a more common name for fool. Nope, if you were in that time and you spoke Hebrew, this guy's name is fool. The same kind of, you're going to call someone a fool, you're going to call them Nabal. I did not know what his parents were thinking. I mean, there was always some issue there that they named the guy Nabal. But Nabal is, for sure, a Nabal. So this fool is a fool. This guy named Fool is truly a fool. And, the text is going to kind of highlight this because what Nabal has just done prior to what I'm going to read is he has insulted David publicly. He's insulted David. And not a minor offense. Now, David at this time, if you remember, David's the one that did the slingshot, in the Goliath event. That David, when he was a boy, David is growing up. Now, as David grew, he was anointed by God to be the king of Israel, but yet there's already a king named Saul. So even at a young age, he knew he would be king. And now he's grown older, and now he's commander of the armies in Israel. He's got 400 men at his back. And Nabal insults David. And the insult that he does is he publicly dismisses David. David's asking for hospitality, and Nabal, this huge community he has, Nabal says, no, we're not going to offer you any hospitality. And not only that, but then Nabal questions David's character publicly in front of everyone. David responded. immediately. And what David did is he took his sword and he strapped it to his side, and he turned around to those 400 men and said, "Strap your swords to your side. We're riding. We're going in to the community, Nabal's community, and that night we are going to slaughter every male in the community. When the sun comes up in the morning, there won't be a male, man, boy, child, baby alive in the community. Giddy up." Yeah, Nabal was a fool, for sure. Interestingly, though, one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail and told Abigail what had taken place, and that out in the distance where David was, that he has strapped his sword on, the army has strapped up, and they're on their way in, and this is what they're going to do. And here's what the text tells us about Abigail. The text says that she was intelligent and also beautiful. The fascinating thing is that the Hebrew word that is used for intelligence, no other woman in the entire Bible got that term, because that term for intelligence was the highest level. They had different words for levels of intelligence. We kind of do too. Theirs were a little more like just perception of someone, and it wasn't like negative. Ours are a little bit more like, can be negative. We're defining how smart we think someone is. But this is like when we say like someone's a genius, even though for the majority of most of us don't know what that necessarily means, probably because we're not geniuses. But we say genius. This is saying genius, but at the highest level, and the Bible never gives another woman that level of intensity of intelligence. So Abigail is incredibly smart, and she's smart socially, not just book smart. She's socially smart and beautiful. She's the whole package. And she married a fool. And sure enough, she did. So what Abigail does is she loads up her donkey. And she loads it up with lots of bread and wine and bags of roasted grain. And says she's carrying raisins with her and fig cakes. She's got the whole thing that she's riding out. And she's riding out to meet David on the road before David gets all the way in for that night of terror that is about to unfold. And when she finds David, she stops her donkey right in front of that army. And she gets off her donkey and she bows down before David. She lays herself out on the road before David. And what follows in 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 24 through 31 is the longest recorded speech of a woman in the entire Bible. In this speech, she takes complete responsibility for her household. It's hilarious because in the text, she also says that her husband is a fool. She literally says Nabal is a Nabal. And she's saying this to the man who is about to kill Nabal. She brings gifts. Her hope is to turn David's wrath away, help him not do what he plans to do. And then she says something that stops David cold. Sure, she brought the stuff. She's doing all she can. She's showing her submission to him. But these words halt the movement of David's army. 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 28 and 30 and 31. She says, "Please forgive me if I've offended you in any way. The Lord will surely reward you with a lasting dynasty, for you are fighting the Lord's battles, and you have not done wrong throughout your entire life. When the Lord has done all he promises, and he makes you leader of Israel, don't let this be a blemish on your record. Then your conscience won't have to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed and revenge." She has literally just told a military leader that if he kills Nabal, it is going to haunt him all his life. Not Nabal haunt him. What he did would haunt him. Because this isn't God. This isn't God saying, go do this. This is David being angry and wanting vengeance for what was said to him publicly, for the embarrassment that he had. And he wants to deal with that, and he wants to get his respect back that he thinks that he's lost. But she told David that God had a future for him. David knew that. David's known that since he was a boy. God's hand has been upon him. And he knew this moment didn't feel like those other moments. This was uniquely different, and she calls it out for him. And she says that this decision is going to sit like a weight on his conscience for the rest of his life if he goes through with it. Abigail did not soften the message. She had something that had to be said, and she took a risk, and the risk was huge. David could have killed her right in the street. The army could have just marched right over her. What she did could have angered David, and David might have said the women too. Everything was at risk. There was no guarantees. But she came to David, and she said what she felt God had called her to say. She didn't bury it in flattery, but she said the true thing to David directly to the most dangerous person in the room. And David's response tells you everything you need to know about what she said to him. The very next verse, 1 Samuel 25, verses 32 and 33, David replied to Abigail, "Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to meet me today." Pause there. David realizes that the woman that came on the donkey and got off the donkey and bowed before him and laid the gifts out for him, that woman came, and the words she said came from God, not from Abigail. David knew God. David had heard God. David walked close with God. This was one of those moments where he was astray from that, and God sends Abigail, and David hears God's voice in what Abigail has to say. And sometimes the thing that we have to say, God goes with and God delivers. When it's something that God has put on our heart, it's something that is holy. It's not something to tear someone down. It's not something to beat somebody up. But it's something that is to save a person. It's something to help a person that is about to drive off that cliff. And God can use us and put those words in our hearts, and we feel it, and we don't want to have the conversation, and we're worried about the conversation, and we risk the conversation. And we do our math problem, and we plan out, and we say, what will this cost me? You know Abigail had all those same thoughts. And that woman got up on that donkey, and she rode out. Verse 33, powerful words from David. Understanding through the words that Abigail had to say to him. And he goes, thank God for your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and from carrying out vengeance with my own hands. David credits God for sending her. He credits her for having the sense to come to him. And David turns around. Nobody dies that night. And they didn't not die that night because David had some kind of, decision to become a better man. It had nothing to do with that. It was because a woman with no title, no position, no army, no official standing in any way, saw what was coming, knew what needed to be said, and said it. I want you to know that staying quiet to keep the peace is not keeping the peace. We tell ourselves it is. Staying quiet to keep the peace is not keeping the peace. If you think staying quiet is to keep the peace, all that does is that just eliminates the possibility of conflict that day. But the issue is still there, and it's going to get worse, and the trauma of that event will be worse. It doesn't stop it. But keeping the peace, and truly keeping the peace, means you say the hard thing now. You do take a relational risk, yes. You walk towards the tension instead of away from it. Because God has given you a vision to see what's going to happen if nobody steps in. And when that burden's on your heart, it is your job to step in. Abigail could have stayed home. And certainly no one expected her to do anything about this problem. It wasn't her mess, it was her husband's mess. There was zero expectation for Abigail to do anything, and yet Abigail loads up that donkey and rides out anyways. The argument that she could have stayed completely silent is completely reasonable. And you might have those same things. There's a reasonable argument why you shouldn't say it. Obviously for somebody else. But if it is on your heart, God has put it there to share a truth, to help someone in their life and their journey. Back to my friend. Every time I tried to say something, I hit that exact same wall. I would say to myself, maybe I'm not certain what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm just not understanding it properly, and I'm just making this up in my head. I didn't want to damage a friendship that was so meaningful to me over something that I thought maybe I'm just imagining it. I told myself I needed more information, but I had all the information I needed. I told myself it wasn't the right moment. I discovered there's never a right moment. I told myself that someone else might be better positioned for this. I don't know of anybody else that had the burden other than me. And then one day, it all came apart. The things that I feared were real. His ministry ended. His family was shattered. And the damage to the people around him were significant, and I was part of that damage. And in the wreckage of all of it, that I had to stand in the middle of, I kept coming back to one question. One question I could not shake. One question that I had to answer. What if I had said something sooner? I didn't know the answer to that. There's really no way to know the answer to that. We don't know if it would have changed anything. I was trying to let myself off the hook by trying to answer it that way. Or maybe he wasn't ready to hear it and it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe the outcome would have been the same regardless of whether I had the conversation with him or not. If I go back over my journals in those days, I am just justifying and I'm just trying to get out of it somehow in some way. But there was one thing I knew and one thing that I continued to write down in my journal. That I knew that I had something to say. And I had found 100 reasons not to say it. I had to own that. And I will and do carry that for the rest of my life. I believe God has forgiven me for not saying what I needed to say. I've tried to forgive myself for not saying what I needed to say. But the hurt and the damage of that situation, I will carry with me. And the question in my mind of what would have happened if I would have obeyed God and said what needed to be said. Now, I say this often. It's a phrase I guess I just like. But I think it's important in a moment like this. Please do not hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying today that every thought that you have needs to be spoken. Please, the people around you are begging that you understand that. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it needs to be spoken. We're not talking about flippant things. We're not talking about, that sweater looks ugly on you. I don't know if I should say it. If you listen to my podcast this last week, I talked about somebody being, right? A guy going and telling his wife she was fat. I said that last week in our message. And he ended up in a casket. He didn't really. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm not saying your job is to correct everyone around you either. Every little mistake they make, they're doing a little bit wrong, that is not your job. I'm talking about a God-given burden for someone whose life is going off the cliff. The one that if you don't say what God has put a burden on your heart to say, their life is going to go in a direction that is devastating. And fashion is not devastating. Abigail spoke up. And Nabal, he still died. Not that night. God dealt with him in a different way later in the story. But Abigail's courage didn't control every outcome. Her speaking up couldn't control all the things that still were going to happen. But it did control what it could control. I'm also not saying that every hard conversation has to happen today. Timing matters. Relationship matters. How you say it is nearly as important as what it is that you say. How you say it matters. Proverbs 31:26 says, when she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instruction with kindness. Wise words, kind instructions, both at the same time. Not just soft instead of true, and not true instead of kind. Both. Requires both. Abigail, she did this in real time. She told David the hard truth. She told it with respect, with hospitality. She said it with gifts that she laid before him, and with her hands and face to the ground. And the truth that she had to share was not less because she shared it in a kind way. And the kindness was not less because it was true. Most of us, I think, are not necessarily struggling with saying too much. I think we're struggling with the thing that we already know needs to be said. Something that we've been carrying for weeks, for months, maybe even years. And we keep finding reasons to delay. The thing, the conversation, the person. Friends, this is what this sermon is all about. Early in my youth ministry years, I was directing summer camp programs. I was even a camp pastor at this particular place. It was for our denomination, their actual camp. And we had had decades of incredible moments in that camp. Kids whose lives were changed as a result of this camp. It was a beautiful place to be. God was present there. It was an amazing camp to be a part of. Our youth ministry at the time was growing in such unique ways. We were reaching out to kids in Sioux Falls that weren't connected to a church. Their families weren't connected to a church. A lot of them were immigrant kids, like from immigrant families. And they were coming here, and our youth group was messy and complicated. But it was beautiful. It's just the way, and I totally give all that credit to Richie Hutchinson, who was our pastor, our youth pastor at the time. His heart was just for the community, and they just came in, and it was a beautiful thing what he created. And because of that, there was so much mess. One of those messes was a teenage girl in high school. She was Sudanese, and in her situation, it was terrible. She was abused by a family member, and she became pregnant. And we had to deal with that whole family situation and what was going on, but she kept coming. And she started to hear about Jesus, and she got more excited about her faith. And she had hope in a situation that was so hopeless. And summer camp was coming up. And we were directing, and we were camp pastors of this thing. And she said she wanted to go to camp. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, we haven't had this at our denominational, all-white Baptist camp before. But we'll figure this out. She was going to have her baby just before camp started, if she had her baby when she was supposed to have her baby. And so we decided, okay, we need to come up with a plan. We found a house that was right next to the camp on the lake. You could see it from the shore of the camp. You could see the house. We had an entire team that volunteered, a whole baby team that volunteered to come along to camp so that this gal could go and enjoy being a part of camp and playing games and doing things, but then come home to go back to nurse to the house. And the rest of the group would be taking care of the baby. She could stay night there. She could be there as long as she needed to and wanted to, and when she had moments to go back to the camp to enjoy what was happening there. And it was just literally fell together. It was one of the most beautiful things. And so then I contacted the camp because I just felt that was a common courtesy, because one of the rules is that campers can't leave camp once they're there, like at all. And I said, well, okay, I know that rule, but like we obviously have like a unique situation here, and we have transportation to go back. Like, we have it handled. You don't have to do anything. We got it. And I called camp, and I told them what we were going on, and they said, we'll get back to you. And the next day they called, and they said, she can't come to camp. And I said, well, we have it literally figured out. You don't have to do anything. And they said, it doesn't have to do with the logistics of it. It's a bad example to the students. I would like to say that as your pastor, I handled that calmly and with grace. I did not. I was furious. Even as I tell the story, I can feel it rising up in me. I have not fully dealt with this yet. And I let them know a few things in that moment. And then I got off the phone and I paused and I said, okay, we really do need to respond to this. And so I prayed about it. I talked to others about it. I wrote out what I wanted to say, so I didn't say what I didn't want to say. And half of our staff was like, you can't say that. That's a little tough. And then the other half of my staff was like, no, you need to go harder. You need to So I knew I kind of found the sweet spot, between, I thought that's kind of where it needed to be. But in short, I called them up. And the risk of saying either she comes or we don't forever. And they said, she can't come. It was not the outcome that I was hoping for. It was not what I was expecting. It was horrible. I sat with that decision, not because before saying what needed to say that I felt like, it wasn't going to cost something, because I did know it was definitely going to cost something. But it had to be said. I knew in my heart that there was nothing that I could do other than say this thing that needed to be said. And I'm not telling you this story because I want you to hear that I got it right. I've gotten it wrong more times than I get it right in my own ministry. I'm telling you this story because there was a moment before I said the words that I said where I almost didn't say them. There was a time when I was getting ready to dial that phone that I second-guessed myself. And I said, I can't make this call. This could be devastating. The cost would be too high. I was running the numbers. I wasn't sure that I even could survive it in my own job. I thought maybe this could even eliminate my job. This was such a big deal to say this to this camp that has been such a part of who we were as a church. But what pushed me across the line was very simple. Because I could see her face, And I could not stay quiet and continue to look at that face at the same time. The choice was as clear to me as it could be. I believe that there is someone in your life right now who needs you to say something. Not a speech, not a confrontation, but a conversation. And one that you have been putting off. One that you know needs to be said. You keep finding reasons to wait, to not have the conversation. Abigail did not wait for a better moment to have this conversation. She didn't wait until she had some authority. She didn't wait until, everything was thought everything would work out just right. She saw what was coming. She got on that donkey and she rode out. Friends, God does not need your credentials today. He needs your yes. In week 1 of this series, we talked about how yes can sound like refusal. Last week, we talked about how that yes can look like an open hand. And sometimes yes sounds like a hard conversation that you need to have, and one that you have been postponing long enough. Say something. I believe you already know the conversation. I believe God has put that on your heart today, and it's the conversation that He's had on your heart for a period of time and could be years. So here's your homework. Have the conversation this week. 7 days to have the conversation. Don't do it in an email. Don't do it in a text message. Do it face to face, voice to voice, with the person who hears what it is that you have been carrying. If you need to prepare for it, great. Prepare for it. Write it down. Share it with those that you love. Find out the best way to say the thing that's on you that you need to say. But keep it short. Keep it honest. Lead with care and not with accusation. But say the thing. And if the conversation that you need to have is with someone who is no longer reachable for whatever reason, someone maybe who has passed away, someone who has cut off contact, or someone that you just simply cannot get to for whatever reason, I want to encourage you still to write that down, to write down the thing it is that you need to say. Because sometimes writing that down and having that and knowing that this is what I needed to say matters, even when the person is someone you can't get to. And if what you're carrying today is bigger than one conversation with someone can hold, if the thing that needs to be said actually has some risk of danger to it, if it has legal complexities of some sort, or in talking with this person there's going to be a level of pain you don't know if you can carry into a room, take someone with you. Or talk to someone first. Talk to a pastor, talk to a counselor, talk to a good friend that you can trust with this information that will help you and help you know how to say what it is that you need to say, when you need to say it. Because yes, Abigail got on that donkey and she rode out, but friends, you don't have to ride alone. Bring someone with you. There's room on that donkey for others. The silence that you have been keeping is not protecting anyone. It is just delaying what needs to happen. Say the thing. Trust God with what comes after. Please stand.